comes off of strength. If you're weak, I mean, strength is just such an important piece to the puzzle.
Strong is strong. I mean, it's the foundation, you know? Like, I don't do a lot of yoga. I've never practiced yoga other than taking like 3 or 4 classes at my own gym. And right when we were instituting our yoga class, the instructors that were going to teach were kind of mad at me and sort of laughing because I was doing like advanced yoga positions and like inversion holds and shit, just never having done it before, because strong is strong, right? Like it's strength carries over, and it's just, that's the foundation. Like that's what you need for everything else. You can inefficiently hack away at a marathon if you're weak, but you can blaze through it if you're strong.
Yeah, it's always going to be.
And you know, you've done a lot of CrossFit competition, right? Like, yeah. And how much does that strength make the endurance aspect of it easier?
Oh, it's everything. I mean, and especially where that sport's kind of going. And I think we'll probably dig into this a little bit more here later in the call. But I mean, I think people are finally starting to realize it's not just a bunch of, you know, metabolic conditioning workouts or, you know, doing these high rep circuits all the time. It's, you got to be strong as hell. Yeah. And if you take a step back and look at the top guys in the sport, they're strong as hell, you know, and they can move some heavy weight. And that's what it all comes back to, you know, is that strength base. So it's really important.
Yep.
So, but kind of going back to your philosophy with like the gym and stuff like that, what I like with that message is basically, I mean, with all training, to be more efficient, more effective with it, it's not to work harder, it's to work smarter, you know? And I think that's what the basic message was that you're saying. And with that, let's kind of dig into the whole background of what you guys do over there. So you mentioned a little bit, biofeedback training. Yeah. So why don't you give us the rundown with that, and we'll dig into that a little bit more.
Okay, so there's two common mantras or sayings or whatever that you hear all the time. They're what you just said: train smarter, not harder, and listen to your body. Okay, we hear those all the time, and if you think about it, and if you ask somebody what does that mean, you'll get one of those answers that's like, well, you know, it just means like not doing dumb shit. Okay, well, that's the absence of something is not usually a very good definition, right? Like that's like saying health is the absence of disease. Like, okay, you know, you can be not sick and not be all that healthy. Am I right? Exactly. So what we're trying to do is, and it's not that this was the idea setting out, but this is kind of the manifestation of it, is to put an actual way to quantify that idea of training smarter and not harder and listening to your body. So let's start with the listening to your body part. The premise here is that you can get feedback from your body in a real-time manner about how something is affecting you. Okay, so if you have ever used a heart rate monitor, you've used some sort of biofeedback. Yeah. If you've ever changed anything about your training in the moment, so let's say you're running and you see that your heart rate goes over X number and you've slowed down to keep it down, you've done biofeedback training. Okay, so you've used a metric that you're being given about your body's state to inform your training and alter that decision. Omega Wave just came out with a really cheap, handy iPhone 1. iThlete and BioForce HRV have been out for a while. Those are heart rate variability based biofeedback devices where essentially you can get a measurement of your CNS and ANS state on a daily basis and then adjust your training accordingly. So the idea there is if you wake up one morning and your readiness score is in the tank, that's the day to just rest and recover, maybe not train at all, maybe do like a light aerobic workout just to get that recovery kicking. The HRV stuff is really interesting, but what it doesn't allow you to do is do real-time feedback. So it doesn't allow you to do a lift and then see how you actually performed on that. One piece of technology that that does let you do that is the Tendo unit. Most people have heard of a Tendo. If you haven't, basically it's just a little device that you attach to the bar, and then when you do a lift, like let's say you do a squat, you're pulling that string and it measures the acceleration. So you can measure the force or velocity of the bar. So there's been some really, really bright guys that have been using this. I never know if I'm saying his name right, like Mike Teuscher, Reactive Performance Systems. He's big on this. He also is big on rate of perceived exertion, like how hard are you working. So the Tendo gives you an actual number of how well that rep went. So the way that they use that is, okay, you're going to do squats at this velocity, and then when your velocity drops off, let's say it's a 10% drop off, that's when you're done with that set. So your body has actually lowered its threshold for performance there, and you're going to stop. Okay, so that sounds really awesome. What's the downside to the Tendo unit? It costs $1,000. That's kind of a downside. And you need one for every lifter, which for a gym is, unless you're a university, like Mizzou is big on them and you have unlimited buckets of money, we can't buy Tendos. Well, what we've found is that simply measuring your range of motion is, for our purposes, at least as accurate as the more expensive technology and the more fancy stuff. So what do? You measure your range of motion, you do a lift, and then you measure your range of motion again. It's stupid simple. I don't know if Logan has ever showed you this stuff hands-on, but we use a toe touch for the most part because it just works really well. So you just bend forward, stop at the first sign of tension, note your range of motion, do a lift, and then measure it again. And what we found is that this correlates highly to, is this lift making you better or worse right now? The way that we run our programming at the gym is every daily, think of it like a WOD, every daily workout has at least 3 options for every lift. So like last night we had conventional deadlift, sumo deadlift, Jefferson deadlift. Actually we had 4 options, and then we had the one-hand suitcase deadlift. So I'll have people test all 4 of those and then choose the one that gives them the greatest range of motion. So in 3 years and over 15,000 sessions of watching people test, I've noticed some really, really interesting patterns. Out of those 4 movements, one of them is very rotational. The Jefferson is very asymmetrical. The one-hand suitcase deadlift is rotational, right? It's torquing your body a little bit to the side, and you got to fight against it. The office worker who has been sitting at a desk all day almost always tests well for the suitcase deadlift. Their body is just craving that little bit of twisting and bending and rotation. I could go on for days with these patterns that I see, but I can tell you, like, there's something going on. Like, there's people's bodies are reacting and telling them what is going to be better and worse for them. So the result is, from what we've seen, significantly better performance and significantly lower risk of injury. I always am hesitant to say this, and I kind of knock on wood when I do, but we just aren't seeing people get hurt. Like, we just don't see it. We don't see the lower back injuries or the shoulders that are all torn out, that kind of stuff. And I think that that's really a testament to the testing, and that listening to your body with something you can actually quantify, and not doing something that is quantified as being worse. So before I go into the smarter, not harder, does that make sense?
That does make sense, yeah. And
cool.
With that, what I was going to ask is, so are you, because this is brand new stuff to me, so when you test people, are you always doing the same range of motion tests, or are you doing different range of motion tests for different movements?
No, we actually use the same range of motion test.
So
the only time we wouldn't use the same test, say that again?
So it's a toe touch test every time?
90% of the time. The only time we don't use the toe touch is if someone has like really, really flexible toe touch, like sometimes the yogis can like put their hands flat on the floor. and that isn't super helpful, then we might use like a shoulder abduction, a shoulder raise, or we even sometimes use a grip dyno. They just squeeze the grip dyno, get a number, do the movement, and then get the number again. And that's just another way of quantifying. But most of the time we do, if somebody's back hurt, we might not do the forward flexion test. We might use something else. Once we've determined that that test works for them, in that they get a response, positive or negative, and that it correlates to another one, then we just use that test for every range of motion. When you move your eyeballs, tissue all the way down into your toes moves with it. So anything you do is going to affect your range of motion throughout the whole body.
Interesting. So,
yeah,
specifics with training. So, obviously, you're not going to be training everybody the same on a given day. So, people are going to be testing out different across the board with the different people that you train. So, like do you have people set in a specific type of program, or is everybody that comes in kind of set in the same type of program, so to speak?
So, for the day? It varies. Yeah, it's a good question. It varies a little bit. So our idea is the program should adapt to you, not you adapting to the program. By and large, everyone who comes in, no matter what their sport is, what their goals are, what they want to do, they're going to do the same basic things. Like, what are the big movements? Bend, squat, push, pull, lunge, some twisting, some anti-rotation work, or, anti-movement work in the core. So by and large, they're going to do the same stuff. What we might do is we might sub out for somebody whom we know has a specific need for more or less of something. We might sub out something completely. So let's say, somebody's got recovering from a back surgery. Instead of having them deadlift from the floor, we'll put it in the rack and significantly reduce that range of motion. Or we'll have them do hip thrusts and take out of the equation completely, and that's where we really come in with the expertise and the experience as a trainers and say, all right, here's how I want you to modify this. But the interesting thing is that it's always the final decision is always up to the testing. So it's like, hey, why don't you try this out, test it, and then they test it and make sure that it's confirmed that it's good. But like I said, by and large, most people, whether they're the soccer mom or the athlete, come in and do the same basic movements. I might have the newer person come in and just do the strength workout. That's it. Go home. And then I might give the athlete a conditioning finisher just to get the work capacity up a little bit at the end. But I said it at the beginning, people are doing the same basic things. Yeah. They're doing the same basic big movements. It's just changing how they're doing a little bit. Somebody's going to do it heavier, more, etc. But it's the same basic stuff.
I think what you said about that, something that was interesting with that is, for your office worker, they come in and, it kind of what they're going through during the day, sitting during the day. So their body is craving a certain type of movement. I think that's interesting. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, like with what you're seeing, like with different types of people and different types of professions?
Yeah, for sure. We find that the profession that you do, or another way to look at it is the movements that you do every single day have an enormous impact on your movement in the gym and outside the gym too. So when someone comes in and they say, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, a guy that's been a member for about a month, who I happen to know is a cop, was saying that his grip was really weak. I saw him doing something that I felt like he was much more capable of doing more weight. And I was like, dude, what's up? Why are you doing that so light? And he's like, man, my grip just won't hang on to it. I've been getting this pain in my elbow. I was like, oh, well, why didn't you tell me? Let's talk about that. So come to find out, his job puts him in this really horrible position to use a computer because it's like turned and to the side. Like, I don't know if it's in his car or whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's something like that. So he's getting put in this really horrible position, and then it's just a game of unwinding that position that he's in all the time. most people these days, it's crazy. No matter what your job is, you end up sitting in front of a computer. It's like fucking doctor, lawyer, cop, whatever,
you
construction
gym,
worker. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. If you own a gym, you spend too much time sitting at a desk in front of a computer. Yeah. It's the same exact patterns. People are stuck in that seated position. So another one example was a waiter who was having his shoulder bug him, and I found out that it was because he was grabbing these really, really heavy plates of food from a high expo bar or whatever, and he was basically just lifting a weight that he couldn't really lift over and over again and repeatedly. And it's the kind of thing where if you're in the gym, I would say, well, stop fucking doing that. It's hurting you. But when it's your job, you have to do it, so you better find a way to make that work and not hurt. And that's one of the things we can do in the gym that's really cool is you control the entire environment. You don't control the environment out there when you work. You just have to do your job. But in the gym, you control every single aspect of it, so you can adjust those movements to unwind whatever you're doing in life.
Interesting. And kind of going back to like the athletes and stuff like that, in regards to like program design and getting specific, like with their sports and different things like that, how do you, I know you mentioned like everybody kind of does the same thing across the board, then you make small modifications for athletes and stuff like that, but how specific do you try to get with athlete programs?
Sure.
In this regard.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So with athletes, with anyone, I'm huge on specificity. I think you should do the most specific thing you possibly can for your sport. So, if you're a rugby player, I want you sprinting as much as you possibly can, because the vast majority of what you're doing, getting a bigger clean and jerk is probably not going to translate that much to being a better rugby player. At least it's not going to in comparison to sprinting. Like if you can sprint faster, longer, and repeat that more often with less recovery, that's going to make you a better asset on the field. So specificity is number one. I try to get people to do the specific thing as much as they possibly can. Number two, in terms of priority, is unwinding, again, like we said with people's day-to-day life, unwinding what they do too much of in their sport. So whatever the sporting positions and movements are, we try to really strengthen the opposite of that and counteract that in the gym. And that's, I think, especially with endurance athletes, is one of the biggest things that you can, that I think a lot of people don't realize what they're actually doing to fix it, but what they are doing is strengthening the opposite of those positions. Like if you bring a cyclist in and they're always hunched over their bike in that rounded back flexion position, and you just open them up and have them deadlift and stand up into extension and stand tall, you're undoing a lot of that imbalance that they have for their sport, which makes them more balanced and more able to continue in that direction. So that's the number two priority. And the number three is just getting all over stronger. Yeah. Because after those two priorities, yeah, of course, stronger is going to help you. If you can pick some